All right, folks, we are back for another episode of This is Crucial, our November episode. Amos, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was very turkey-filled and quiet, and South Carolina Gamecocks won on Saturday. Just want to point that out. They beat Clemson.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you thankful for this year?
That I get to do this podcast with you.
Yes,
Clearly, yeah.
Absolutely. Of course, that is something to be thankful for. As always, Amos and I are grateful and blessed to host a conversation about issues that are crucial enough to make us uncomfortable. And so we are thankful that you all are tuning in, and hopefully that you all are continuing these conversations in your own respective spaces and communities and homes and relationships. So Amos, why don't you tell us about our guest for today?
Yes, Jason Max Ferdinand is a speaker. He's an author. He's a composer. He's a choral conductor. And he is a musician. He serves as the director of choral activities at the University of Maryland in College Park, Maryland. He's also the founder and director of the Jason Max Ferdinand Singers, which is a professional touring ensemble that Ferdinand formed in early 2021 on the heels of the pandemic and also the January 6th insurrection and also the time of great social reckoning that gave birth to this podcast after George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis. So that's who's here.
So for those of you who love music, you are in for a treat today. We're talking lots of music. Our conversation with Jason includes the songs that we want in our funerals and what it means to be a member of a choir.
And we also cover the power of music to bring us together and the ability of music to exclude. And we also wrestled with the actual true definition of classical music.
Yeah, we got to hear your special definition of classical music.
Yes.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us for This is Crucial with Jason Max Ferdinand. Enjoy the show. Jason, welcome to This is Crucial.
Thank you so much, Amos. Darlene.
Well, let's jump right in here. I noticed when I was listening to performances on YouTube from that you conducted and you led that church music features in your repertoire. It's all over the place. Where did you first hear God through choral music?
Ooh, way back in Trinidad and Tobago, where I'm from, born and raised, and I was raised on a university campus that was very, very. There's just a bastion of musicians and choirs and quartets and sextets and children's choirs and orchestras. So it was just kind of all around me. So, at a very, very early age, I was introduced to God through music.
Is there a particular like faith tradition that you or denominational tradition that's in your story?
I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, and the university that I mentioned, Caribbean Union College at the time, which is now University of the Southern Caribbean, is one of the many tertiary education institutions that are part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church around the world. And this one, located in the most southern of the Caribbean, a lot of the students from the Caribbean and Central America, South America would come to that university. So it's really a great melting pot of culture, music, everything you could think about in a metropolitan type of environment existed there in the 80s and 90s at Caribbean Union College.
Mm-hmm.
How did music take such a root into your being and sense of system that now you're a musician, you're leading and to use a word that Amos and I would use, preaching and movement building through music? Like, how did that journey happen?
Well, along your journey, you come to intersections and you meet crucial people in life. And I think people that I met were so influential and so positive, and they were so good at their music that it became something that I wanted to be part of. And I think also, in no particular order, my parents, who were not musicians, but for some reason they thought it important that their children uh, took piano lessons and sang in the choir, and they probably had no idea what they were doing at the time. And your question is kind of crucial because in Trinidad and Tobago, in the Caribbean, for the most part, no one grows up saying, "I'm going to become a classical musician."
Mhm.
Especially in those days, unless you're doing calypso, or soca, or reggae. Hopefully, you know those those forms. I mean, you weren't a musician on a professional level. So, I did sciences for many years and kind of came up in the British schooling system. So I did advanced levels, Cambridge exams, and biology, chemistry, and physics. But all along, I was doing music, and there came a pivotal night, a night when I just felt like my life's work was in the balance, and
Mm.
I was so nervous to share that with my parents that I wrote a letter and I put it in a place where my parents could find it. And at the time, my dad was a university administrator at the same school I mentioned, and my mom is also an educator. And basically, in my letter, I said, I'm in the science track. I'm doing really well, but my passion just seems to be in music. So I made that decision, and luckily for me, or as would have it, my parents said, "Well, Jason, if that's what you want to do, we'll have to support you in that, and then send you to the best university that we know of, which also belongs to the Seventh Day Adventist tradition. That will send you to that school." And I say, luckily, or as fate would have it for me, because many of my friends wanted to do the same thing, and their parents didn't let them do it. And
Oh, wow.
life turns out differently for different people. But luckily for me, my parents supported it, and that's when I made the switch to go from becoming a medical doctor to pursuing music.
Mm. So what about choral music in particular? When why that I guess specialty as opposed to say being a
Yeah.
classical pianist or
Yeah.
um,
Well, that answer is easy for me. I miss the socialization part of choral music is just intriguing to me. Working with people. I did my first degree in piano, but I knew very quickly I didn't want to be a concert pianist. All the many hours of solitude is just not my thing. And I'm an introvert, but it's not even about being an introvert. Just the the whole feel of team. I'm a big team person, and accomplishing something as a group as opposed to myself just feels so much more organic for me. And then going back to that Trinidad and Tobago scene, our elementary school would have these Christmas concerts, and we'd always be in choir or some form of an ensemble, a small group. And I tell people to this day, I love singing in like a sextet or something with close harmony, where you know, yes, you're dependent to sing your part, your sole part, but as a group. uh, so choral music just became a safe haven for me. And Amos, I guess to answer your question even more in depth, I knew I wanted to be a choral musician when I quickly realized that I just never had any nerves if I had to get up to conduct a choir or a group. But ask me to play a piano solo for a recital, and I'll just be like quaking. And
mhm.
that for me, that peace I feel when I get up in front of a group to conduct was just like a confirming thing for me. Like, this is exactly what you're supposed to do. And you could really be fully engaged without any sort of nervous jitters or anything like that. So that was another sign for me that the choral thing was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is is there a choral experience that you point to, like a choir that you were a part of that was influential in you choosing that path?
Oh yeah, I mean it's quite a few actually. My children's choir with Auntie Cheryl, as we called her. She was everybody's Auntie Cheryl. When I was 3, 4, 5, that was just like, you know, it was so much fun. This was just so much fun. Um, I sang in a group when I became a little older called the Caribbean Chamber Singers. When I started being exposed to, the choral canon, Mendelssohn and Beethoven and that sort of thing. And then when I decided to study music and I transferred to Oakwood College, as it was known then, and which became Oakwood University in 1997, and my 2 years there were pivotal with Dr. Lloyd Mallory. The Aliens then was just a force. And then I went on to another great choir for my master's degree with Dr. Nathan Carter, who was yay high, but he was a giant of a musician and giant of a human being. And Nathan Carter really made me see what a professional conductor was like. So the Morgan State Choir was out of this world. I just never expected a little guy from Trinidad to be touring the world with going to Japan and Prague and England and France and all these places, singing in the Morgan State University Choir. It was just pivotal. And then when I came to my doctoral degree here at the University of Maryland back in mid 2000s, that choir was pivotal too. It was pivotal but in a different way. Each stop had a different angle to it that I guess kind of made up the composite me now. And the Maryland choirs really showed me kind of more what a professional choir and those circles and the type of repertoire and the do's and the don'ts of that circle. So I feel like amidst all of those groups, those choirs, it gave me a real broad sense of the capabilities of a choir and the reach of a choir, and each segment has a different vibe and a different reach and a different feel, and I feel like I got the best of all those worlds.
I love how you talk about reach, and you keep on saying words like pivotal, which is so inspiring to me because that means that we're pivoting in a certain direction, right? So Amos and I, the currency of our industry are our words. We do a lot of talking, too much talking. And, it's so interesting. And I'll have this conversation with the music director at our church is how we create a partnership between the talking and the music. And how we stop looking at music not as a part of the conversation, not as a part of helping in the pivoting. In fact, I would say 99.9% of the time, the most pivotal moments in worship are through art and music. So in all the you just listed off so many countries you've traveled to. How have you seen music move the conversation forward in ways that just a lot of this yap, wasn't able to do?
Yeah. Music has a way of opening people up. It hits people in a totally different way than prose, reading it, or even hearing it. Music has a way of opening up the soul. And I think once you open that up, people are more receptive to hear, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen it in situations where the people don't even speak the language of the music, the text language of the music, but we speak the language of music. I'll never forget, which is interesting. Right in front of my desk right now, I don't even know why this is here, but this says the Aeolians from Russia with love. And this was a trip the Oakwood University Choir took back in 2012. And I think I brought this out because I wanted to relive this moment. We were in Russia, in Moscow, and I don't know what came over me, but we just started singing Amazing Grace. This is in the middle of the concert, singing Amazing Grace, just ad-lib. And this pivotal moment came when I turned to the audience and just kind of beckoned, cued for them to start singing. They started singing back to us in Russian. Now, Russian people don't react like that. And I remember looking over, seeing ushers just breaking down crying and people in the audience crying. But that's a moment where the language barrier didn't stop the vibrations of the music and the melody of the music and the familiarity of that melody. And it was just one of those moments where people from different parts of the world, literally, shared in a beautiful moment that brought us all together. And then it was right after that, and you two are preachers, so at that point in time, we had a young man in our choir that is actually a preacher today, Dr. Richard Martin, and he followed up the Amazing Grace with, I mean, he's one of the most talented extemporaneous preachers. I mean, he just started talking, but his talk probably meant so much more after that moment. Mm. And not if we had programmed it and he just came out to talk. It just opened up people. He came out with his translator. And so music has a way of opening the soul, I believe. And people are more apt and more receptive to hear after music kind of washes over them. At least that's how I think of it.
Yeah.
The story you mentioned and the way you're talking about music opening people up, it also, when it opens them up, they become vulnerable, you know, and so in conducting, with the knowledge that music opens people up and will take them to a place of vulnerability, mm-hmm. As a conductor, is that a privilege or is it a burden, or is it both? And
yeah, it could be both. It could be both, and it's something that I preach to all my ensembles, that on the flip side, on the other side of the audience, we have to be vulnerable to the music as well. It starts there. The people see and experience the vulnerability through us. We have to be in that place first, and it's a scary place, you know. And as choral conductors, we have to be very sensitive, and you have to create a safe environment for people to be vulnerable. You just don't want to, you just don't want to open up that kind of worms and kind of reel it back in. You have to kind of, but I believe we could inculcate it. We could foster it at every rehearsal, at every worship moment, at every teaching moment. I believe that's an ingredient that's missing from a lot of these gatherings, whatever the gathering is. People just being honest and being open. Now, coming back to the music, yes, I could sing the music of the text, every note, every rhythm, but if people don't sense that I'm really genuine about what I'm saying and singing, it doesn't open them up in the same way. So is it a burden? It can be a burden, because when you do that, Amos, it's kind of like, like a preacher. I tell my students all the time, do you think a preacher feels like preaching every time they get up to that pulpit? They probably don't. And that's when it kind of becomes a burden. In spite of what you feel, you still have the responsibility of preaching to people every weekend or whatever it is. And it's kind of the same responsibility we have. Every time I get up to do a concert, I may not feel like doing it at the moment, but I have that responsibility to share the music and to share the messages of all the text. Mm-hmm. And to do that, I want to do it in a genuine way. And the best way to do that is to live the music, at least in that moment, like get into the music and sell the story, sell the text. And 9 times out of 10, people can see when you're genuine about it and when you're not. And and I kind of want to be on the genuine side. So it can be both. It can be a real joy, but it becomes a burden when you just, as a human, you just don't feel in that moment to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, speaking of pivotal moments in terms of like living the music, living the message, you reference the shift that obviously COVID had on your work. And how it kind of put your work on hiatus, especially since choral singing groups in public, that was like one of the most dangerous activities you could do at the start of the pandemic.
Yep.
And then at the beginning of 2021, you were presented with a new creative opportunity,
yeah,
a pivotal moment, and then January 6th happened. Yeah. And so something that I read that you wrote is that A bevy of emotions were surging through my being. However, optimism was leading the way. I felt strongly we will get through this. And one thing I was sure about was your newly formed ensemble would have a voice in speaking to some of these societal deformities. I felt determined to not be a bystander and to let my creative voice be heard. Can you tell us more about just how that was like a beacon call for you in that moment?
Yeah, there were so many things that what's the word? Serendipity.
Yeah.
The sequence was just I couldn't plan it. So the fall of 2020, Voces 8, which is one of the most astonishing vocal groups in the world, based in London, England, and they are so forward thinking. They started these virtual festivals, and they called it Live from London, hosted by Voces 8, where they literally got some of the best groups from all around the world. The groups would record concerts wherever they were, and then Voces 8 would share it, buy a ticket, and you look at it for 2 months, 3 months. And my group at Oakwood at the time, where I was before University of Maryland, we participated in that fall festival. So that showed in December, I believe. And shortly after that aired, Voces 8 came back and said, "Hey, Jason, do you want to be part of our spring festival?" But the timelines were so short for a university corps. School was out all of December, most of January, and then to come back. So I said, no, we just don't have enough time to do it. And the manager of Voces 8, Robin Tyson, the older people may know the group, the Kings Singers from London as well. He was a member of that group. And he kind of looked at me, even over Zoom. I could see that look he gave me in my eyes, and he said, "Jason, have you ever thought about starting a professional choir?" And I said, "Robin, yes, it's crossed my mind, but why would I even think about that now? We're in the middle of a pandemic. This is January of 21." And he said to me with that look in his eyes, "You might want to think about it." And that's all he said. "You might want to think about it." So I did. For 2 days, I slept on it. And I can't explain why, but I just figured, let's just take a stab at it. So I literally just started calling friends and some former students. And from making those phone calls to the recording, that was a 6-week span. Now, anyone who knows choral music, that's, even as I say it, it sounds crazy. But we sent out the music and got that project done. But amidst all that was happening, January 6th, and we had just come out to the George Floyd situation and COVID. COVID for me, I can't speak for everyone else. COVID was a horrible thing. It is a horrible thing. But for me, it was a chance to really refuel and to really rethink a lot of things. And I just made a determination that like I wrote, I didn't want to be a bystander anymore. I think the choral world, the music world, sometimes we have this position that I'm just going to kind of stay over here. I'm not going to speak to anything. And I just think music historically has always been a reflection of society. Always. Anyone who studies music history, I mean, the Baroque period, when banking was discovered, and that's when we started seeing all the architectural filigree, the fanciness in the design. That's how the Baroque period starts, and the music then reflects that. All the melismas, all the fast, all that stuff reflected what was happening, and it shouldn't change. So with all that going on, I just took it upon, made a determination that I'm gonna, speak to the things that I can speak to. And this group, like for example, one of the days we recorded that first project, there was a big rally that was going to be happening downtown DC. We did a recording here in Maryland, and we were afraid. We literally had to hire some security to man the church and that sort of thing. So we were living in the moment as the recording was happening, and we're like, man, we can't just not say anything or say nothing. So that's just always been on my mind, and it's always been on my mind too, for choral conductors, for anyone in music, especially in classical music. Are we just going to program the same way we did before the pandemic, before George Floyd, before all these
Right.
things, or are we gonna, be a little more? Are we gonna dig deeper and try to be part of what's happening and provoking audiences, provoking them in a good way,
Yeah.
give them something to think about, or are we just gonna do the music just to get a round of applause? And I think that'll be tragic if that's the same formula we adopt even now. I mean, there's just so much to say and so much to ponder. I mean, the world is in a mess, right? I mean, that's how I see it, and nothing against the pastors in you, but a lot of the controversies. We look at the Middle East, we look right here in America, have been started, from religious fights
Yeah.
or agreements between religious entities. So we can't even look to the churches or denominations per se to fix any of this stuff. So yes, the church has to continue to try and heal, but I believe that what I do as well can provide some sort of healing.
Yeah.
And that's just been my MO, from pandemic to now. And I
Mm.
use the pandemic as a time to really think and write and ponder what the next 3 years will be like, because I was so sure that it couldn't continue just to be whatever it was before.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, some of the I mean, to have an effective public witness, that makes others uncomfortable. You have to take risks in your witness, in your testimony, right? Can you is there any particular points, over the last, say, since 2020, when you've taken a risk, um, that uh, that that was especially formative for you in your journey as a public, I would even say public theologian, considering what you're doing,
Yeah, definitely that recording was a huge risk. You know, health wise. I mean, we did recording in mask and had all these precautions. So that was a risk unto itself. Yes. Two, what I call the repertoire. What I call the repertoire risk, not really. Maybe risky in terms of here's a new professional group and there's a certain direction or repertoire you would think a pro group would want to do. Like, we're a pro group, we're going to tackle this music. That's kind of the approach sometimes. And that's not what we did. We picked music that we thought would speak to, yes, people who go to church, and yes, people who don't go to church. Um, we picked music that really took us all the way back to slavery, but we wanted to do it in a way that it hit the ears in a fresh way, and we picked some of the spirituals that would be relevant to today. So, like, when we picked a spiritual like "Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen," I mean, that's just, it's kind of self-explanatory in terms of the message and the passion behind it. Um, I wrote a song during that period called "Safe in His Arms," and the first line says, "The world, the world has gone mad. There's chaos everywhere."
Mm.
Immediately, hopefully, it grabs people's attention. Like, but it grabs your attention in a way that it just brings to reality what's happening right now. I'm not talking about something 200, 300 years ago. This is now. The world has gone mad.
Hmm.
And so it was risky from that sense of taking up professional core in a way that's probably not the norm. But so far, just by the feedback we get from audiences and organizers, so far we think is working.
Mm.
Uh, People seem to be leaving, in a different way than they came. Not necessarily better or worse, but they leave giving issues some thought. They leave seeing a group, which, for right now, the group is, black, Latino. They see a group looking like me, but singing Bach and Handel and Beethoven, that's a big statement in my world. Um, a group that looks like me, you expect to hear all spirituals or gospel music or something. That's not the case. I mean, we have some very highly skilled, and I say musicians on purpose, be it classical, jazz, whatever. I mean, in the group, and for that to come to the forefront and people leave thinking, oh, wow, they sang the whole gamut. That's a huge win in our world, which has been very stained by stereotypes and stereotypical thinking, and to get people out of that mode is one win, a huge win in terms of that. So yeah, so we've taken some risk, I would think, and to take risk, you have to have no fear, right? Or if you fear, you still is internal, and you just kind of press ahead anyway. And that's been one of my sermons to choral educators. Make your decision, make it on, and I'm not talking about some kind of decision when it comes to the repertoire, decision when it comes to how we want it to sound, how we conduct it. Make a decision. Just don't say, I did it because I felt like it. That's not good enough. Tell me why, but then be brave and do it. And I'm surprised at how many people are afraid. Like in the real sense of the word, I'm afraid to do this song. Or, we have all these discussions in my world about, vibrato, no vibrato, which make a decision and be brave. And I'm sure that applies to your world as well. But yeah, we've taken a risk, and so far, I think they've been reaping the rewards that we want to see.
I would say one of the types of bravery that I am seeing in the church, but also it's an issue of controversy and it's seen as problematic, is actually doing what you described. So we're having predominantly white choirs singing spirituals. And when we see a predominantly Black or Latinx choir singing classical music, that's celebrated. But I know at least in a lot of the church spaces I've been in, the second, like even throughout the pandemic, I saw this amazing choir do a spiritual, and immediately the comments in the YouTube were like, why are all of these white people singing spirituals? So how do that tension, that bravery, not even the vibrato, but even the selection of who gets to sing what? As a leader, a conductor yourself, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, and I get that question a lot, and like you just described, it happens on both sides of the fence. Meaning, I'll get Caucasian people asking, "Am I allowed to sing spirituals?" Or on the flip side of the fence, you'll hear, "Well, why are they singing spirituals?" If I'm and I don't want to oversimplify this, but the response I always give is this: that's like me saying to myself, Jason, you know what? I'm not going to do the music of Brahms or Beethoven or Bach because they didn't look like me or I didn't have the similar background. I mean, if I were to do that, I essentially just totally evaporate all of classical music and what we teach. Okay, so then why would I want to impoverish myself of doing those masters or doing any music, any kind of world music? So my answer to anyone who does not look like me, my answer is go ahead and do it. Like, the music is here for all of us to be done. And again, I don't think I'm oversimplifying this, but I just see it that way. And then on the flip side, coming from, I'm Black, from the flip side, when I see a choir of another background doing music which seems more natural to me, I hear and I see a group of people being empathetic to my background. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
Now, I totally understand and I respect other people might see it as offensive. I get that, but I choose the way I think about it. I see a group of people saying, you know what, we appreciate this music. The spirituals were birthed here in America. This is America's music. You are American, you look different than me, but you can do it too. So I I hate. I don't think compartmentalizing how a group looks and then what they should sing is healthy at all.
Yeah.
I think choral music, especially, should be more. What's our word from sciences? Cross fertilization. Like we don't have to be an expert in all the genres. Like I don't expect someone to be an expert in classical music and jazz and but we all went to school and we should have the curiosity enough to learn the basic elements so that we could teach it to our choir so that we could perform it. And then we have this broader range of food on the table to offer people. So my answer is this. I believe the music is there for all to do it, be it Brahms, Bach, the Negro spirituals, jazz, whatever. And I don't think any of us need to apologize to do it or ask the special permission to do it. I think it's there, and let's do it, and let's do it in the right way. Not appropriation, but out of empathy and trying to learn more about other sects of our community, of our society. That's the major reason music exists, so I can learn more about you, and you can learn more about me. And that's why I want to do music from South Africa, or do music from the Caribbean, or do music from here in America, which are the spirituals. So let's do them. Again, that's just my oversimplified answer to that question.
No, it's so helpful. And I mean, I have to ask the follow up then, what's the right way versus appropriation?
Um, you know, doing it and trying to learn not just not just what's on the page, but call someone, call a expert in that field, learn the background of the people, learn why it was written, get into it so that it doesn't just feel like you're just trying to check off a box on some, well, I got to do a piece by a female composer. Check. No,
Right.
no, dig deeper. I got to do a piece by a African American or something. No, dig deep. And again, that goes back to what we talked about before. Your acts will all come out in the music when you do it. It goes back to that being genuine, being
Yeah.
vulnerable, and it will all ooze out to the music when you eventually do it. I mean, you could tell a performance where they just learned it, just for learning it. They didn't take any time to learn about what the people were going through and why, and what did the music speak to. But when you do it, people can tell, and it becomes a real experience. And if you're not convinced that will come out, then make it part of the performance. I was a student, or the conductor turns around and talks about the piece, and so people know, oh wow, they actually did some homework here, and people will respond better to it. So that's the way I see it, and I think we all need to make it a little simpler and make it an act of empathy as opposed to, well, why are you doing that? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's here for us to do.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm going to ask another follow up question. And now that I've got like an expert here who knows something about music, this is a question I've wanted to ask somebody like you for a long time. What is classical music? Like, what makes some music classical and some music not classical?
Yeah. Well, we tend to use our word sometimes a little loosely. So, in the strict sense of the word classical defines a certain time period. So, in the music history world, you have the early music, then followed by the Renaissance period, followed by Baroque, um, Renaissance, Baroque, and then classical Romantic. Romantic there being another period, and we come into 20th century, 21st century. So, in the true sense of the word, from a music history perspective, it represents that period that Mozart came up in, that time period. In Then we use word classical in a more broad sense when we talk about, I guess, anything that's not jazz, gospel, spiritual. We kind of have a very loose translation of it, and in church circles, it starts to then incorporate the anthems and that sort of thing. We use it classical to define that. And then some people also use the word classical to define anything that kind of stems more from the Western tradition. which kind of goes back to my other definition, that it's not jazz, it's not gospel, it's not anything like that. So that word is used very, very loosely sometimes, and I guess whoever uses it, you have to just ask them, which definition are you using, right?
Yeah. I've always used the definition of just like classical music is sophisticated music, you know, and it's kind of like at a distance. It's for sophisticated people who can really
Yeah,
get it, you know, who understand why
yeah,
that was like that. And, oh, they did it this way, you know, Bach's seventh this way last week, but now they've done it that way. Isn't that
yeah.
amazing? Like, that's what I always think. I think about classical as in the sense of like the people that actually appreciate it. That's
Right.
what defines classical music for me, you know?
God. And that's the definition too. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, and the thing about classical music, and I mean, I'm gonna have some church members I know that are gonna listen to this and they love classical music. I'm not trying to like clown on classical music, but it's always kind of like, there's something concealed about it, disguised, hidden, you know, like, um, and not exactly about the music, but the way the music is treated in that, like, you know, it's hard to find somebody that loves classical music and that's willing to like sit down and tell you exactly what you should be like listening for, like educate you on it, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of like either if you get it, you get it, you know. If you know, you
Yeah.
know. Like classical music people were the first people that ever said, "If you know, you know," and then like if not, move on, you know.
There's a lot of I do agree. I do agree. But Amos, to flip that coin though, now that you said that, there can also be a level of mysteriousness in
Jazz the same way. Yeah.
exactly what is spirit. When you sing a song like, I don't know, when I fall on my knees with my face to the rising sun. I mean, that music and that line was written out of, it was a code, right?
Yeah.
Say, rising sun, that means the sun is gonna, it gave you a sense of direction. It told you the time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you sing a song like "Wade in the Water," that was code for,
Yeah.
river and make a run for it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's mysteriousness in a lot of music.
Right, right. And
I,
there is. I mean, you know, you were mentioning music has the power to bring people together and heal. It also has the power to exclude as well, you know.
it, I,
And to divide, you know. Not the music necessarily, but you know, the people who are called to conduct it or just steward it, you know. It can be
that's
stewarded as a tool of like destruction and
yeah,
division, or it can be stewarded as a tool that
yeah.
for reconciliation and healing as well.
And that's why it's so important now. And you see a lot of organizations doing these pre-concert lectures or post-concert talks, whatever, to kind of demystify the music. Or people are doing it now amidst the concert, right? Whether it's on the screens, they show the text or they show the
Mm-hmm.
meaning or program notes to try and demystify and explain and to include more people in about what's going on. And I think that's an important act now, so that more can be immersed in it and understand it. Um, and that's why in my concerts, I tend to try and introduce sets or songs, especially the ones I know that are going to be a little, okay, what is this talking about? I think it's just important for the healing of the nation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
I love what you said in the beginning about why you love choral music and how, how you're going to be trembling if you're sitting at that piano by yourself. But if you're surrounded with people who, I mean, everyone's given a unique role in the choir, and yet all the voices have to sound good together, right? It is a beautiful metaphor for humanity and community and all of those things. And so I have an interesting closing question for you because Amos and I are pastors, right? So each of our churches are very fortunate enough to boast wonderful choirs that have that are steeped in their own unique traditions. And at the same time, right now, both of our choirs are led by young individuals who are honoring the tradition they've come up in and also seeing new traditions that lie ahead. And so, what is your advice to someone who sits in a choir? How should they show up? What is the philosophy a member of any choir should have in order to be a helpful, contributing member of that team?
Yeah, I think you answered it right at the end there. I mean, to think in first person plural and not in first person singular. Uh, people join. Um, People join a group, whether it's you register for some class, community group, a church group, a choir, a sports team. By and large, they join it because um, they want to become better, but they want to do it through the medium of community. And, and thinking in first person plural is key. But at the same time, they want to feel accepted. They want to feel heard. They want to feel safe within that community, and community is the key. And to do that, we all singularly need to bring the right attitude to it, so that plurally we can make it um, an environment that we all want to be part of, and we all want to become better humans and better citizens. So just thinking globally, having curiosity about our neighbors, about the person we sing next to, being empathetic about the people we're next to, and always having a great sense of optimism. So during the pandemic, I call that being a CEO: curiosity, empathy, and optimistic. And I think if we have those three things, in addition to others, but those three main things, I think that's where the future is. And I think groups, choirs in particular, will have more. What's the word? There's a word I'm looking for. Is escaping right now. But we'll feel so much more gratified at the end, I think, if we approach it that way, and not so much more about showing our musical prowess per se. I'm not saying do away with the musical sharpening of the skills. We have to do that, but when a choir sings to me, I don't want to hear or see your musical prowess. I think people are kind of over that. I want to hear and see something that is going to prod my being and my soul and my heart, and make me feel, like tomorrow will be a brighter day. Again, I don't want to oversimplify it, but people now are looking for so much hope.
Yeah.
And there's a song that I just did. I didn't write a song. There's a song that I perform a lot, and there's a line in it that says, "Too soon today will be yesterday." I don't know why that seems so profound to me, but too soon today be yesterday. And then it goes on to talk about tomorrow will be a brighter day. And people are looking for so much hope, and people need so much hope. And we have to approach our choir music, our choir ensembles we have to rethink it, is essentially what I'm saying. We have to rethink it. It's not just a service from week to week for a church. Like people want to hear heart, and they want to hear heart and see heart, and I think that's where we need to be going now. At least that's my approach, and I'm sticking to it until some other premonition hits me. But that's my MO right now.
Love it.
Last question is a question that Charlene and I have asked each other. At a time of great boredom. Once you hear this question, you'll understand why. It's like we've run out of things to talk to each other about. So let's ask this question. But what both of us have actually done much planning on our funerals, and about the music that we want to hear there, and the people that should be present. And that's what I was talking about when we get real bored. It's like, hey, what music
Yeah.
must be at your funeral. So I'll ask you that question.
Oh
What
wow.
music must be at your funeral?
Wow. I haven't thought about it like that, but a few come to my mind readily. The great Methodist preacher Charles Tinley, right? He was also a great songwriter, and he was a great songwriter. And you have to put that in context. He was someone who had to teach himself how to read and write. So for someone to write this many songs, and for me such profound text, is just astonishing to me. There's a song that everyone who knows me knows is my favorite song in the world. He wrote a song called "Someday." Um, Beams of heaven as I go through this wilderness below, guide my feet in peaceful ways and turn my midnights into days. When in darkness I grope, faith always sees a star of hope, and soon from all life's grief and danger I shall be free. Someday. He just pictures so clearly. So that's one song that has to be on there. And there's another song that actually came from the classical world, almost in a true sense, but adapted by William Dawson in his setting of, it's called Pilgrim's Chorus. Once more, dear home. It just talks about a journey, and at the end of the journey, the last line says, I'll serve my God forevermore. And those of us who went to Morgan State University in that period, like the late 90s, many of us have said, that song just has to be done at our funeral, and we want people from Morgan to come sing it. Just means so, and it's a cappella, no piano, no organ, no
Yeah.
orchestra, all heart. It's just one of the most beautiful songs ever. So those two for sure, I'll want on there.
Hmm.
Thank you, Jason. And thank you for your time today, and for making yourself available, and for being so honest and hopeful with us. Appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much,
All right.
Amos and Sean.
Okay.
Good to be part.
All right.
Good to
Bye
be
bye.
with you.